Hello, everyone, and welcome to our November Town Hall meeting. Our guest speaker today is Laila Riazi. She is the 2025 president of the WAVE. What is the WAVE? It is the Washington Area Village Exchange. I had the pleasure of attending their conference back in September. I was in awe of what these villages do and the sense of community that is out there. That's why I invited Laila to join us for our town hall so we can know more about the village concept. But first, I would like to share a short bio. I shortened it, so my apologies, about who is Laila Riazi. As I mentioned, she's the 2025 president of the Washington Area Village Exchange and co-founder and president of Cheverly Village. She previously served 11 years as a Cheverly council member and was elected mayor in 2019. A committed advocate for youth, environmental stewardship, and civic engagement. She serves on local green infrastructure and environmental justice committees, and co-chairs the resident advisory group for implementing the Prince George's County Climate Action Plan. Her community and professional work includes leadership roles with Community Crisis Services, Inc., supporting suicide prevention, crisis response, and homeless services. She holds a bachelor's degree in Slavic studies and philosophy, with additional work in international conflict resolution and graduate studies in international relations. My apologies, Laila, if I made a mistake with any of these points.
No mistakes. Just to qualify, I was a mayor during the pandemic. I am no longer mayor. That was 2 mayors ago. So,
okay,
so I would not want the current mayors to be like, what? So, with that, thank you for that introduction, Tara.
And the mic is yours.
Okay. Good morning. We are still morning. So yes, I'm here to talk about what is a village, what is the village movement, whether or not you have a village available to you where you live now, and what role you can play in expanding the village movement, because each of us here can help birth a new village, just with our level of investment and involvement. But I'd like to begin by understanding a little bit of where people are, across the DMV. So if you feel comfortable just sharing what town or community you're in, what state you're in, that would be good to know.
This is Sandy. I'll shout it out that I'm in Reston, Virginia.
So you have a village in Reston. So
we are a big village, so to speak.
Yes. Well, we'd be happy to put you in touch with the village organization that exists in Reston and others.
Okay.
I know Naomi is in Friendship Heights Village.
Okay. So we have Friendship Heights.
Yes. Yes.
Falls Church, I see in the chat.
A village in Friendship Heights. Yes.
Yes. And I saw Falls Church. Others?
Mm-hmm. I think, Nancy, you live in Arlington, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
I'm not sure if she belongs to a village or not.
Yeah. And Arlington has a broad stretch. There are areas not yet covered by village, but there's a wonderful, strong village in Arlington. Its geographic range is somewhat limited. And the leader of that village is also a member of the board of directors of the Washington Area Villages Exchange. So it looks like people are in areas that in the Metro DC area, and what we're starting to look at and serve is the Mid-Atlantic area. There are just under 100 villages stretching out to there. In the DMV area, there are about 80 villages in existence, many more in formation. So when we talk about a village, Often my personal village, Cheverly Village, will get a phone call. Can I move to your village? And we have to say, well, Cheverly's a wonderful community, but Cheverly as a community is not a village. Villages are organizations. And more beyond organizations, they are neighbor helping neighbor, largely volunteer-based organizations. And they exist. And the first village was formed back in 1999, actually, in Boston. And in the Beacon Hill Village was formed in the Beacon Hill area of Boston back in 1999, where a group of neighbors came together and they wanted to figure out how they could support each other to age in their homes and stay well in their communities. And they said, these small supports are what are preventing us from being able to stay in our homes. How can we come together to make that possible? And it wasn't that they didn't have, in many cases, a loving family that they could move across the country and live with. It was more that they really wanted to retain what they loved about where they lived and to bring the services in rather than them needing to step into a retirement home, an assisted living, or a nursing home if their medical needs were not such that it required that level of assistance. And so that's where the village movement began, Beacon Hill. Now, as far as a community that took that on, in Greenbelt, Maryland, there was a community that developed that was not a village, but did village-like services and supports within community. So you'll sometimes hear, if you were to get deep into the lore of villages, that Greenbelt says, oh no, we were doing that, we just didn't call it a village. But Beacon Hill will stand firm. Beacon Hill was the beginning of the village movement. Yes, these competitions do exist. We turn everything into a competition. So from there, the second village is very close to home, and that would be Capitol Hill Village. And Capitol Hill Village has grown into a major operation with extraordinary supports. So when you look at the services that Capitol Hill Village provides, it's extraordinary, from having social workers on staff, from extensive volunteer supports, to the point where if you look at Capitol Hill Village, please do not be intimidated by what they have been able to grow, because villages are as unique as each and every community. So I'm going to break that down a little bit. When we talk about a village, people say, so what is a village? So now we know that it's an organization. It's an organization that is developed by residents of a community that say, hey, I want this to happen. And then the question is, well, why do they want it to happen? And what does a village provide? So when I said that villages reflect to their communities, some communities come together and say, I want stronger social connections. I've worked all of my life at this particular position. I am not satisfied with deciding that my working life is done and now I sit around. I want to be able to contribute, and I may contribute in many different organizations, but I want to be able to contribute to an organization that helps it so that I can continue to live and age well in my community and in my home. And when I say home, it does not mean that it needs to be a house. There are villages that absolutely support and work with individuals who are living in apartments. There are those that, townhomes, this type of situation. So it's not, sometimes people think, oh, I have to be living in a house. Not the case. So with that, so villages come together, people say, I want a village that supports my social environment so that I can meet new people outside of my work environment that I worked in for the past 30 years. But that was in this location here in my community. I want to be able to have that connection. I want to be able to stay physically active. I have things that I want to contribute. So social villages can readily develop. And often those social villages villages may begin that way, and then they may move into services. So there are some that stay only social. There are some that also say, guess what? Transportation is the biggest need in many areas, because when you're used to driving yourself everywhere and you decide that it's really not as safe as it used to be for you to drive, or that you also might want a companion if you're going to a medical appointment, so that you don't have to drive off into a faraway parking lot and then navigate yourself to your appointment, then transportation becomes one of the first services that villages often engage. And so that support, as all other supports within villages, is often undertaken by trained and background checked volunteers. So the service of transportation, but that's only the beginning. That's not where services end for some villages. If you're talking about something as simple as what is one of the largest risks as we grow older, one of the greatest risks is falling. So if there are things that you would be doing in your home that would lead to a risk that you fall, then there are volunteers who will step forward to, if that is as simple as changing a light bulb or pulling things up from your basement or down from your attic, if there's that situation, or doing small assists around the home. For some people, the idea of having a healthy lifestyle includes how they prep their meals. For many villages, it can be that, oh, somebody wants to be able to have fresh fruits and vegetables, but they no longer have the hand strength or maybe the hand-eye coordination to be able to cut the vegetables themselves. So many villages, even if they're not doing full meal preparation, because sometimes something like that will involve too much for a volunteer, but a volunteer will step in and chop vegetables or do meal prep for the member to be able to make the meals on their own. And that's an extraordinary support. And it's also an extraordinary connection, because one of the things that comes from village organizations, and I really want us all to hear this as we grow older, for our village in Cheverly. I was co-founder of the village in Cheverly, and that came about because I don't know if any of you know of our community, but we are covered in trees. We're always facing loss of some of our mature trees. But if we remove the trees from Cheverly, our community would be unrecognizable, and it would be an incredible loss. If people ages 55 and older moved out of our community, it would be an extraordinary loss, because those individuals, when I moved here, were the individuals who greeted me with a new baby 2 weeks after I moved in. They led so many of our volunteer organizations, which is how we got so much done in community. They stepped forward to help in so many situations. So the idea of a village is not about doing for, it's about doing with, to support aging well in community and keeping your community alive and thriving. So absolutely, to be in that mind space of when we're talking about villages. One of the things that I personally upsets me is when people do like the patting on the head. Oh, we're going to do this. This is going to be, no, you're going to receive far more than you contribute when you volunteer with the village. So the question becomes, who volunteers for a village? In our village and in many villages across the nation, older adults are not only receiving services and social connection. Older adults are the leaders of the organization. They are the board members, they are the presidents, they are the coordinators, they are the planners, and they are the really leading edge of the movement. And often they are also volunteers. When I began by saying neighbors doing for neighbors, so you are both receiving services from your neighbors and you are also contributing. And depending upon your physical means, that could be walking with someone, that could be being a driver, or that could be calling someone on the phone for a check-in. So there's a place for everyone to both receive and to share and to lead within a village movement. And often the village is somebody's second or third or fourth unpaid career, because for many of us, the idea is I may have stopped working for my first or second paid position, but I'm not about to sit around. And I want to make sure that I have a voice in how I age, and I want to have a voice in how my neighbors are supported in aging. So that's just an idea of what a village is or what a village can provide. So it can be note-taking at the doctor for some villages. It can be sitting down and working with you to sort through paperwork for other villages. It can be book clubs. It can be walking trips. It can be checking on neighbors. It can be meal prep. It can be anything that the community decides and commits to making work for the members of their village. And I say members. Most villages are member organizations. Now, what that means, I'm sorry, I just got an email through. What that means is, by a member organization, it often means that there is a membership fee, but not all villages charge to become members. And membership fees vary widely. So a membership fee could be as small as $5 a month to somewhere around $50 or $60 a month. Now, initially, that can feel like, oh, that's a very big fee. Most villages have a sliding scale or a supportive scale based upon somebody's income in retirement. And each village handles how they approach checking on that, individually. For some villages, it's just when you sit down that you show the front page of your tax return. No copies made. It's just so the village can check off, okay, this individual's income is less than $30,000 a year, so this is what the membership fee will be. Or this is a household. There are 2 members in this house, and this is the income, the income, and so therefore this will be the membership due for that household. And I say this because one of the extraordinary and actually very damaging myths out there is the idea that villages are unaffordable. And I know for our village, we have to battle that each and every day. And one of the things that in our village, there have been membership dues as low as $10 because someone just absolutely doesn't have the means and somebody else steps forward to donate the difference. I'm actually an advocate of each member paying something, and it's for a somewhat odd reason that I'll try to explain. And I'll go back to my family. My father would absolutely balk when he was with us, absolutely balk at the idea of receiving charity. So if he paid a due, if that due was $10 and he was a member, and he was able to draw upon the services that came with his membership dues, that meant that he had every right to make the request. And therefore, he wasn't in a position where he was turning to a neighbor, however well-meaning, or he was turning to someone and seeking a charitable effort. It was a matter for him very much of pride. And so what I've found in some of the work that I've done, both in my community and say internationally, you want for people to be able to understand that they are deserving of the services, that they have made the action to become a member. So that's just my little piece. If from here people go out and develop villages. Um, the other thing that's very important in this conversation is I had said that the villages began in Beacon Hill, Boston. So that was a largely Caucasian, well off, let's say upper middle class, upper middle class community. And some of the things that they were able to put together and support was by virtue of those characteristics. So what we've come to recognize, because as you know better, you try to do better, is there are enormous gaps in community, and villages need to be able to reflect their community. So the idea of having diversity, and diversity often we don't explore diversity. We see it only in issues of visible color of skin, and which does not begin to plumb the depths of diversity. And there's extraordinary diversity in our communities. That could be diversity of means, ethnic background, LGBTQ plus identity. And when we're talking about disabilities, accessibility, the opportunity for people who of different faiths, in this day, the political dynamic. What does it mean in a community for all people who want to be able to stay where they are living and to do well in community? How do we reflect that in a community organization such as a village? And it's an extraordinary responsibility to not have a village that is only for those in the know or of privileged access by virtue of information or connection, but that the village movement does the hard work to make sure that anyone in the community is able to access the services, supports, and social connection, and that it reflects that the entirety of the need and the interest within community. So that's some of the work that villages have been engaging over, I would say, these past 5 to 10 years of transforming something that began as a largely white middle class organization style to something that is diverse, and also diversity of age, because now there is the recognition of the value of intergenerational villages. Some of the intergenerational villages were naturally occurring in some communities. That's naturally occurring in the community in which I live, but it is now actually a dedicated goal of many villages to have intergenerational villages, meaning that the give and take, the exchange of services and supports goes back and forth across ages. And that's actually an extremely powerful way to meet a multiplicity of needs, depending upon what youth might require and benefit from, and what, as we age, we might benefit from with youth. And that brings me to a major, often service that villages provide. In addition to the helps around the home, the raking of leaves or the shoveling of your sidewalk and access to your vehicle and these sorts of things, it's technology assistance. And that is more and more one of the main requests, service requests that members make and that volunteers seek to meet. So if that means trying to figure out your phone, that something's stuck, if that means computer assistance, if that means trying to set up to be able to use Zoom or to use FaceTime to communicate with your family, at a distance or close by. That can also mean, if you install different cameras, or if you want a doorbell camera, these sorts of things. Often volunteers, not only for the installation or fixing of an issue, but sometimes to assist with the research of what it is that you want to purchase, what it is that you want to acquire. And I don't know how many people here are familiar with the Washington Consumer Checkbook. So that's a resource, for example, that our village draws upon, just because they do a lot of research on area firms and repairs. And so we draw upon that, not only for, not even so much for technical issues, but for issues of if you need to replace your roof, or there are other things with your home, as a resource of what is a reviewed and reputable service provider. We also do our own neighborhood checks on service providers, and we don't verify, we don't have a special relationship with any provider, but what we do is we will offer community-based providers 3, so that you can do your own interviewing and your own selection and determination from those. But I don't know if this has ever applied to anyone here. I know I could often benefit from this. When you're sitting down and you're trying to look at that, let's say the roof, you want to get your roof repaired, and you have 3 different things, you're like, what does this mean? So to have somebody sit with you where you have your list of questions, to make sure that your list of questions was answered by each firm coming in, and then to assist you in looking across the different offers and understanding those offers, so that you can make a decision. The volunteer doesn't make the decision. The volunteer helps you organize the things that you would have to help you make that decision. And that is a very popular support. So there are a lot of things with villages, but one of the things that I wanted to do is to share just from across the country. I wanted to share a couple of videos, and these are each just 2 to 3 minutes long, about villages. So you can see how people speak about them, how people have experienced their time in the village, and what has driven the village movement. So we'll see if technology supports me today as I try to do this. So I'm actually just going to go to sharing my desktop, and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead. And I am going to actually start with a village out in Portland, Oregon. So can everyone see this?
Had a lot of experience with older people as they aged, and a lot of them lived in nursing homes or assisted living. And I visited them and I thought, I don't want this. And so when Hannah gave a talk on the village concept, I was just drawn to it right away. I thought, yes, I may not be able to avoid going to assisted living, but I can delay it. I can age with this group. Before I thought, my daughter's the most important person in my life. I want to be near her. And now I thought, well, she really needs her own life. And I have a very nice family here with the villages. Well, I was very eager to volunteer because I want to be the center of the party. I led some garden tours. We're going to do some music. As we age, it's very scary to think that, you're all alone. Your body's failing you, your family aren't near you. And village is, to me, is a family.
So with that, what she's bringing out is how she was both active in, she wasn't saying that she would remain at home forever, but that she wanted to control her timeline to the best of her ability and how she wanted to engage her life. Now I'd like to share something a little closer to home.
This journey has many chapters, and just because one is becoming older or retiring from a lifelong career or even an encore career, it doesn't necessarily mean that life is over, and it doesn't necessarily diminish the importance of home, family, and community.
People want to continue being independent and want to continue living in their communities.
Community is kind of an interesting word, but it's really an extension of your family.
I looked around my own community one day and discovered that I knew nothing about the senior services available to my friends and neighbors. And when I looked a little deeper, the reason I knew nothing was because there was nothing.
The Village movement is coming at a time where it needs to be here, because as increasing numbers of people are coming into their later years, the systems that we have in place are not designed to effectively serve.
Assisted living or skilled care or a retirement community is something that I did not look forward to.
There is an enormous amount of caring and energy and determination to reach out, to change, to grow.
The ability to contribute is just incalculable.
The Village offers that opportunity for us to stay independent.
It's just really important to life, especially as we age. We've led lives of extraordinary diversity. We have been given the gift of time, the gift of health, the gift of education.
Nothing is like the Village.
Just people helping one another.
It's expanding their lives.
We're building community. We're building connections.
And we are so determined to change life in a better way for us and for the rest of us.
Articulated in one voice, something that millions of Americans believe in their hearts.
And I really think it has something to do with our desire to change the image of aging.
The Village movement can only grow. I mean, as we all know, there are more and more of us who are aging. We've grown up at a time when we really were able to and demanded the ability to kind of be in charge of our own lives. And that's only going to increase. I think that there will just be more and more villages.
We're not talking in terms of 50 or 100 in the country. You might be talking about 50 or 100 in your state or 50 or 100 in your metropolitan area as time goes by. So I think this is just the beginning.
Now, that one dates from a few years back. And so from 100 in the country, we're now talking 300 in the country, around 300. And also this movement extends across the world.
About 12 years ago,
Oops,
two women, friends,
let
looked
me
at
get
each other
back
and said
and
that they wanted
stop
to
this so that we don't hear that in the background. So there's a lot more that I could go into. That last video was from an organization, a national organization of villages called the Village to Village Network. And then some of the other material was from the organization that I'm representing today, which is the Washington Area Villages Exchange. Let me give you a little idea of how those two work together. The national movement is pretty extraordinary. There is a very large regional village collective in California, for example. There's a very strong growing in Ohio of a village movement. So this is happening. Rhode Island has had a different model. In Portland, Oregon, they have done a different model of supporting villages. It's called a hub and spoke model. So in each part of the country, people have come together and figured out how to create individual villages, how to create, let's say, a village consortium, how to create a central services model that takes care of administrative supports, and then have different volunteer, spokes of that hub arrangement to be able to expand. Villages often follow a geographic boundary of a municipality, town, a city structure, but in many of our communities, there are large breadths of unincorporated areas. So there are other ways that villages develop. It may be a homeowners association. It may be a faith-based organization that steps forward and steps out of serving only those of their faith to be able to have people come together for village supports. So when there's this idea of when you see one village, you see one village, I mean, it's not truly that way, because all villages share the volunteer ethic, the neighbor helping neighbor. But the goal for the Washington Area Villages Exchange, because we are a regional organization, is that we connect villages in operation and in formation across the entire Mid-Atlantic region. And we're really growing into the Mid-Atlantic so that we aren't siloed, so that we're not only hearing our own voices, but those organizations are learning from each other in order to better support their members, to bring more services and supports to their members. So that's the role that WAVE plays in this particular region. So I don't know where we are in time. How are we right now before I decide?
It's 11:38. We're good.
Okay. So what I would like to do, one, I welcome questions. There's a short video that's mainly photos and just a little bit of text. I'm just going to take it very personal to the village that I co-founded and the village that I work with day to day, for a different flavor of what comes from a village. So let's see if I can get this video to work, because sometimes it doesn't like to, but let's see. So we'll go back to desktop. And we will then go to, let me just take you on a journey, because this will probably work the best. Okay. This is service, helping hands, getting that window air conditioner in. And I was talking about tech time, fun and games, respect, and it all starts with respect. Get-togethers, excursions, come and work aquatic gardens there. Be free. Sharing and caring. The clubs and the leadership it takes to make it happen. And so that was just a very short a picture of my personal community's village. And when you said about the gathering together, one of the things that became increasingly evident as a result, I'd say, of COVID is how do people connect in challenging times. And so you may have seen there people gathering outdoors with space between their chairs, some people masked just to be able to support a way to gather. But that also led to a greater use of Zoom, a greater use of things that we thought we were connecting and we were doing the best that we could. But also what we saw come out of COVID is the increasing evidence of isolation. And isolation is not only for those who are growing older. Isolation is through every age of our community. So one of the things that villages have addressed and have been an incredible support is on addressing isolation. And I would actually turn it on its head, because villages aren't so much about addressing isolation, they are about creating community. So to really not have it be, oh, how are we going to figure out how we're going to solve the issue of isolation? Villages from day one have been driven by making sure that there are opportunities and support for lasting connection and lasting wellness, both the physical, the social, and the very personal connections that develop from that. So that's a little bit of where I'd like to take us in this, because I've talked about social connection and I've talked about services, but in the services, that leads to social connection and that leads to lasting relationships. You would think that it's very difficult to get transportation volunteers, and it is, because people's lives are very busy. They may work a 9-to-5 job, these sorts of things. But when you ask volunteers what they most enjoy as far as a service, it's transportation, because it's the building the connection along that drive from Cheverly to Walter Reed, from Cheverly to Baltimore, these sorts of things. And for our villages across the way, it's that exchange. It's learning about somebody's life. It's building a friendship across that time. And that is something that it's not an idea that you are checking a box by offering a service as a volunteer. It's that you are being able to enjoy and benefit and develop relationships. And many volunteers who are younger than seniors step forward because they are not able to be with their parents. Their parents may be across the country. Or when they step forward to help plant flowers, and the Girl Scouts do that, or an Eagle Scout project that develops for a garden, like a standing garden. These sorts of things. It's the idea of being able to support something in community because you may not be able to connect with your grandparent or with your parent, and that connection is lasting. So, and then it's also one of the things that I wanted to address is when I talked about intergenerational villages, and we talk about older adults in villages. There are some villages that say you need to be age 60 or older, or 65 or older, because that community has decided that for themselves. But there are many villages, such as ours, that there is not an age. It is whether or not there's a situation in somebody's life where they can benefit from the village. So we have village members that are in their early 40s to a member who I believe is now 103. So within that span, it's how can the village be of service to this particular family? And I say this particular family because, at least from the approach of many villages, Cheverly Village being one of those, is Wave, I know a variety. For many villages, there is no such thing as an individual membership when somebody lives within a household, because the service and the connection benefits and draws upon the entire household. So, just to have people think about that, an individual does not exist. There are very few situations where an individual exists in isolation within a household. So it wouldn't be that just one individual steps forward and says, I want a membership. And one of the things is, for example, I'll take a younger member of my particular village whose spouse has a full-time job, until recently had 2 children in the household, and her spouse, even though medically could be supported within the environment, there was no social connection or support within the environment, and sometimes there was no relief or respite for her. So to become a member of the village really provided an extraordinary amount of support. And for a time, that was to prepare a couple meals a week and to have that. For other times, it was so that she could get away and do some of the things that she needed to do away from the home, and did not feel that she was abandoning her spouse by doing so. So that idea of social visits and respite for her, and then the social connection that developed and the friendships that developed for the volunteers who would step forward and do. So there's that. And then there is the 103-year-old who, until the past, I think, 5 years, was an active volunteer at an area hospital. And she lives with her daughter, and her daughter was also a member. And the way that they have engaged both with the village and benefited from the village and contributed to the village. So that type of interaction and that type of support. So from here, I think it's really best to open up for questions, because I'm sure there's a lot I'm forgetting to share. And I would love to answer your questions.
This was amazing, Laila. I mean, you brought up so many important points that we don't think of, but it's there. And this support is much needed. So I'll open it to the questions or comments. Sandy, you're still muted.
So this is Sandy. I'll ask, there's a bias in my question, obviously, from my, as you put it, well, I think of it as my second career. Somebody in one of your videos said encore or something like that. Anyway,
yes.
So having retired from a full-time job and then realizing I did not want to be home, I wanted to contribute something to somebody. Low vision advocacy. So you undoubtedly have a bunch of seniors in your community who have vision challenges. And do you have an active way of keeping them engaged? Because that sort of exacerbates the sense of, I can't do this, and so I'll just self-isolate.
So we have some individuals both with vision and also with hearing that need support. I will honestly say for our village, it's a case-by-case basis, meeting with someone, seeing what supports that they need and the way that, and developing that relationship for the individual to be able to feel honestly that they're being heard and that they can share what it is that they need in order to engage. And some of the things, it's a very much a learning experience. And that could be, quote unquote, as simple as making sure that things are narrated. It can also be finding out what supports they have already that they use. And sometimes things on Zoom are better for them than in person, and they have assists to be able to better engage on the screen. For others, it's the idea of having companionship and going out for a walk together and just choosing that walk location wisely. So, and what if they need physical support, so there's training on how a volunteer will offer an arm. What is the situation, especially for some that are hard of hearing. The idea of being one-to-one often works. And so it's one-to-one, face-to-face, being able to hear each other with that. So that can be a challenge in some of the social situations just because of background noise, and the ability to hear a one-to-one conversation is important. So sometimes it's also modifying the equipment that we work with and trying to adjust for background noise. Modifying the situation so they're clear paths. So all of that is one of the ways. But what we found is there are things that everybody enjoys. For example, I wouldn't have necessarily thought this, but hand dancing. So hand dancing lessons. People who have never done it before, people who were of low vision, low hearing, got to move and enjoyed it. So, things like that. I don't know if that answers your question. Now, there are other villages, and we try to do this as far as being able to access the website, to have an accessibility tool on the website where you can expand text, where you can have things read to you. And that's something that, some of the regional and national organizations really take a look at, and trying to bring those services and supports to individual villages so that they can offer those to their members.
You have clearly thought about this quite a bit.
Well, there's always more to learn, and we always make mistakes. So the other thing is to constantly be in a place of learning, and not of defensiveness, but of welcoming correction and welcoming information. So
that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from anyone?
I think there was something
Yes.
that I saw come in on the chat.
Okay, sorry.
How do you handle residents with cognitive decline? An excellent question. And there are some things that villages cannot do. I'm going to take a step back into, because it made me think of volunteering. Volunteers cannot do things that require a license. And this often shocks people because as a neighbor, I could help my neighbor with clipping nails or washing her hair. But as a volunteer, that's a licensed practice, so we can't do that. Volunteers are not home health aides; they are not nursing assistants. These sorts of things. That's out of a volunteer role. We can do some information and referral for those sorts of roles, but then that brings me forward into the conversation that many villages are having right now, because villages, as I said, began back in 1999. And a number of the villages in the area began, let's say, maybe even 10 years later than that. So people who have joined the villages, their physical and their cognitive experiences have changed. And there are many villages that are figuring out, how can we serve someone who either the physical no longer is supported by the volunteers, or their cognitive condition is no longer able to be supported by volunteers, and it actually creates a risk for the individual. So one of the things is many villages are also in touch with member families. And so one of those key needs in there is that there's a conversation happening before someone is in a place where they have no resources or supports if their cognitive situation is changing. And some villages bring in what's called care management to meet with families to have a plan as to what the next steps are. Because village volunteers cannot keep somebody safe in their home if they're experiencing a cognitive decline. That's just not the role of a volunteer-based organization. So villages will reach out to family. They may reach out to talk with the member and reach out to a local services support to see if there are additional services that can be brought to bear. But that is ultimately a member and a family decision. And there'll come a point in time where villages can supplement what other professional services need brought in if someone is seeking to remain in their homes at that point. But the village support will not be sufficient for them to be able to safely remain in their homes, depending upon the extent of the cognitive decline. Now, there are incredible supports that villages do incorporate. There are memory services and supports, and where you bring in different activities that help strengthen someone's memory. They are not to address cognitive decline, but they are to maintain your memory and your connection. So those services and supports are very popular. We work with the Alzheimer's Association. There are memory cafes that support if someone is working with someone with cognitive decline in their household, that supports both the member experiencing the cognitive decline and their caregiver or their family member. So there'll be services for both of them. And villages connect with those memory cafes for those supports. Does that answer the question? I see A. Smith, so I'm sure. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. So that seems to answer that. Mm-hmm. And then I saw the population limit to give the most optimal services for residents. That depends upon the capacity of the village. Quite honestly, there are villages that have hundreds of members, and often those villages have developed a budget that will support at least one staff member. So in our village, we have a quarter-time administrative assistant on a contract basis to try to support the volunteers so they can do the wonderful work that volunteers do, but they don't have to figure out how to do the social media post, to Instagram and Facebook and all of these things. So to have that support. But population limits are only based upon the organization's capacity. What does happen in some areas, for example, Rockville, Maryland, I know that there are 10 to 12 villages in formation just in Rockville that are being supported by a wonderful organization, both by the city of Rockville, and there's a staff member there who supports that, but also by Village Services Network. And they help villages in formation take on the tasks that they might need to do. So there is that. Let me see. Optimal services. Now, our villages is very small. We're about 60 people. We need to grow much larger. There's much more need than the individuals who have connected with our village. So most villages need to focus on sustainability and on growth. And then what certifications do your employees have? Are they bonded and insured? Many villages do not have employees. What I think is essential and what I strongly advocate in my leadership roles in developing villages in Prince George's County and as president of Washington Area Villages Exchange is all volunteers should complete background checks and they should have training from their village. And when I say training, that has a big swath, in training. Anywhere from how do you assist someone out of a vehicle, or how do you assist someone from a wheelchair to getting into a vehicle, and to know the difference between the assists that you cannot do as a volunteer. You cannot lift a member. You cannot, if a member falls, you cannot pull a member up. So the understanding of how a volunteer assists by offering an arm, by placing a chair. So the passive supports, but the member needs to be able to reach out and access that arm for support. These sorts of things. Two, the services you do and don't provide, the respect you show a member, these sorts of things. That any volunteer who signs up, desires to volunteer for many villages, including the one I founded, is they complete a background check. If they are going to be providing transportation services, they also complete a driver's background check. They take a course, and I'm speaking for some villages. For some villages, they'll take a course in driving, that is an online provided by the insurance company of the village. And they also submit references, community references. And those are things that we do. Most villages, and I argue all villages who provide services, I'd say even social, need to carry insurance. And so the insurance does not take the place of volunteers' driver's insurance, but it is just an insurance, in case there is an accident. There's insurance in case there is theft from somebody's property, these sorts of things. That's part of being a responsible organization for that. As far as anything that requires a license, volunteers don't do that. And then as far as whether or not we put out a list of providers, it's up to the providers as far as their certifications and their bonding, their licensure, their insurance. And then, and somebody.
Yeah, I think this was it.
So,
yeah. This was, honestly, I will watch the video again once we have it, because it was a wealth of information and something to think about for all of us. I really thank you, Laila, for your time. And I hope your boiler gets fixed today because I know it's very cold in your house today.
Thank you. And I would be happy to follow up. I wanted to leave two two websites. One is just www.wave, W-A-V-E, villages.org. That's the website for the Washington Area Villages Exchange for you to find out more. When I talked about the Village to Village Network, the national, that is once again your www.vtvn, and then the N works into network. So VTV Network, NETWORK.org. So those are two places where you can start. And my contact information, feel free to reach out to Tara, and feel free to share both my email and my phone number for text or voice.
And I took a picture of the two websites as well.
Okay.
So thank you very much again, Laila. And I'm sure we will be in touch
For sure.
soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And everybody take care. Okay. Bye-bye.